just 6 seconds.
Recording in progress.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Berkshire County branch of the NAACP General Membership Meeting. I am happy to be partnering this evening with the League of Women Voters of Central Berkshire County and the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, bringing to you this special forum. You know, I always talk about how important elections are, and I always talk about the political scene. We know that there's nothing more important than local politics. So it's really important, and we feel it's our responsibility as the NAACP to educate our community at election time on the various candidates running so that you can clearly make the right decision. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a very important position in all communities, and that is the position of our sheriff. And this represents a public education campaign by ACLU of Massachusetts to build voter awareness about the life-changing decisions that sheriffs make.
You know what? That's probably not a big deal.
Excuse me, can I ask everyone to please mute your mics and stay muted? Thank you. Polling shows that many voters are not familiar with sheriffs, but when they learn more, they are more likely to cast a ballot for sheriff in the next election. Polling also shows that voters favor treatment and education over punishment. We're going to dispense with our regular forum of our meeting, but I do want to let our members know that we are now the leading chapter of NEAC with membership. Our membership is now at 486. We passed Boston, so we are the leading branch of NEAC for membership and growing. So thank you to all my team that worked so hard at this, and really pleased that our community is really stepping up. I normally ask for a moment of silence, but we have so much not to be silent about. So I'm not going to do a moment of silence tonight, and I'm going to encourage everybody to be aware of what's going on in our nation and use your voices. Do not be silent to the rights that are being taken away from human beings. Pay attention. I am now going to turn the meeting over to Kamar, who will introduce our for this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce Javier Luengo Garrido. Over the past few months, I've gotten to work with Javier in activating around a variety of issues. He is an organizing strategist and community advocate for the ACLU of Massachusetts, which he joined in 2017
Well,
to
this is
coordinate.
the Know Your Sheriff thing. Tom Bowler, who's
where his role was to support immigrant families and coordinate access to regional resources and family preparedness documents. During that time, he and a team of local attorneys also worked on parole and bond cases locally and at the southern border. Currently, Javier's work focuses on multiple issues across the organization, spanning from racial justice to technology and civil rights. He's based in Western Mass and works on municipal and statewide advocacy and campaigns. Prior to joining the ACLU, Javier served as a liaison, interpreter, and educational specialist support for the Northampton school system, and he was a political advisor and organizer in Santiago, Chile, and Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I also want to introduce his colleague, Olivia Santoro. She joined the field team at the ACLU of Massachusetts in 2017, where she helps to manage and develop the ACLU's growing activist base. She brings with her a background in community organizing, leadership development, and coalition building. Prior to joining the ACLU, Olivia served as lead organizer of the Long Island Progressive Coalition in New York, where she organized on a range of economic justice issues, including the Fight for 15, and organized for fair elections reforms. Olivia received a BA in sociology and geography from Binghamton University in New York. And with that, I will turn it over to Javier and Olivia to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm Olivia Santoro. I'm the Community Outreach Strategist at the ACLU of Massachusetts, and we're really thrilled to be here tonight with all of you, both for the first half of the presentation, which is going to be an education piece on the role of the sheriff, and then following that, a candidate forum. So I think it's going to be a really exciting evening to learn about both of your sheriff candidates and generally about the role that they play in our communities. So I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint that you can follow along with as we walk through our presentation today. So just a quick agenda so you know what to expect. I'm going to start out the evening by just asking all of you a few questions to test some knowledge in the room about what you already know about sheriffs. And then we'll zoom out a little bit and take a look at what people across Massachusetts know about the role of the sheriff. The ACLU partnered with a firm called Beacon Research to do a statewide poll just to learn more about where voters were at in terms of their knowledge of sheriffs and the role they play in our communities. Next, we'll just talk a little bit about some of the campaign goals of our Know Your Sheriff campaign. And Dennis did such a great introduction of our campaign earlier. This is a nonpartisan voter education campaign to educate voters across the state about, again, the role that sheriffs play in our communities. Then I'm going to turn it to Javier, who's going to talk a little bit more about the different roles and responsibilities that sheriffs have. We'll talk about sheriff elections and a little about what has happened in Berkshire County over the years. And we'll end with some ways that you can all get involved before turning it over to your sheriff candidates for the second half of our presentation. So just to start us off, and I'm going to just ask 3 short questions, and if you'll humor me and maybe pop your best guesses into the chat box, and then I will reveal the correct answers. So I'm going to start out with this first question, which is, how many incumbents lost their seat in the 2016 sheriff elections? Give everybody just a couple seconds to make a guess here in the chat box. All right, this crowd is in the know. Yes, the correct answer is 0. All right, our second question is, who do sheriffs report to? This one's a little tricky. Another way to phrase this question are, who are the sheriffs accountable to? right, we got a couple different answers. We got voters, we got attorney general and the voters. Someone mentioned the police commissioner. So the correct answer to this question is actually just the voters. So although the sheriff interacts with some of these other entities that you've named in the chat box, at the end of the day, our sheriffs are elected and are only accountable to the voters. And so it's really up to us to elect the sheriffs that represent the values that we want to see in our communities. All right, and our third question is, how often are sheriffs elected? All right, we've got two answers in the chat box. We have 4 years and 6 years, and the correct answer is in fact 6 years. That's a longer term for an elective office than we typically see. Most people do guess 4 years because that's what we typically think of, but this is a much longer term. And this year, both our sheriffs and our district attorneys will be up for election in the fall. All right, so let's turn to our statewide poll. Where are voters at across the state? So this first question, we asked voters, can you correctly name your sheriff? And I think we were surprised at just how few people across the state could correctly name their sheriff. And so you'll see here that only 17% of voters could correctly name their sheriff. And if you look at our little chart on the right that breaks it down by county, you can see that about 10% of Berkshire County voters could correctly name their sheriff. So you can see that there's a lot of room here to educate voters about sheriffs and the role that they play. Our second question was one, of course, that I posed to all of you, which is how long is the length of term for sheriff? And only about 10% of people could correctly name that it was 6. Most people did, in fact, think it was 4 years. I see a question in the chat about the district attorney. The district attorney is a 4-year term. And so that's a tricky one for people. And so again, this is another point that all of us can be out in our communities talking to voters about the term length for sheriffs. This next question that we asked was about the roles of sheriffs and whether or not they're elected. So you're all here in this room for this candidate forum, so you know they're elected, and about 59% of voters across the state knew that as well. It's not overwhelming, right? It's a majority, but not overwhelming. And then this other question was, do sheriffs have the same duties as police officers? And this was a little tighter. 33% of people said yes, they do, and 41% of people said no, they don't. And this is an important question, and Javier is going to get into some more details about what sheriffs do. But I think it's important to point out that sheriffs do not play the same role as police officers in our communities. They don't do community law enforcement. So I think that's an important distinction for voters to be aware of. Next, we asked voters to indicate how important each of these reasons were to vote for a sheriff in the upcoming election. And so I'll just name some of the top results here. Sheriffs are responsible for overseeing county jails and houses of correction. That was very important to people to go out and vote. Sheriffs decide what rehabilitation and education programs are offered in county jails, also indicated as very important. Sheriffs have a 6-year term. Whether or not sheriffs choose to assist or not assist in federal immigration enforcement, and then the list sort of goes down from there. And so all of these, I mean, even at the very bottom, which says that sheriffs can help or stand in the way of people who are incarcerated and their access to voting, still 64% of voters saw that as an important issue when they go to the polls in September and in November. Okay, so this particular slide, this is our favorite because this really sold for us that the Know Your Sheriff campaign was important and could have a huge impact across the state. So when we first started out this poll, we asked voters how likely they were to go out and vote in the sheriff election. And then along the way, we gave them more information about what sheriffs do, and we continued to check in about this question. And so at the very end, we asked again, what is the likelihood that you will go out and vote? And after they heard all of this information, it increased by 20 points. And so 65% were very likely to go out and vote, and 23% were somewhat likely. And those numbers combined are huge. And so this indicated to us that if we are out here talking to community members about the role that sheriffs play, people are more likely to go out and vote in the fall elections. Okay, so what are the campaign goals for the Know Your Sheriff campaign? First and foremost, we want to be out educating voters about the role and power that sheriffs have, and again, that they're only accountable to the voters. We're hoping to increase voter turnout in sheriff races. One of the things we're going to talk about later is that a lot of times people will go to the polls, but they won't vote down ballot for sheriff. And so we really want to close that gap and make sure people are voting down ballot for the sheriff races. We want to engage in conversations about the criminal legal system and the role that sheriffs play in that. And then we want to build towards accountability for sheriffs in our communities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Javier to talk more about the specific roles that sheriffs play.
Thank you so much, Liv. Everybody can hear me well? Yes, perfect. Thanks for having us today. We love this partnership with the League of Women Voters in the NAACP of the Berkshires. Thank you so much to Dennis Powell, president of the branch, and Helen Moon, and everybody who made this possible. So, this is an educational campaign, right? We firmly believe that educating voters, for those voters to be able to go and vote based in their values, in the clarity of the information, is paramount for us. And this campaign reflects that. When we start talking about what sheriffs do, baseline, they run houses of corrections, right? Which is more or less over half of the state incarcerated population. We're talking about 11,000 beds, right? And this includes pretrial and sentence people, and also immigrant detainees. When we're talking about pretrial and sentence, is sentence people under 2.5 years, right? What they also can do, they can enter in contracts with the federal government. There is a specific contract that we see in Massachusetts called the 287G that we're gonna sort of touch base in a little later. They supervise the sheriff department corrections and administrative staff. They manage their own staff at the jail. They control the sheriff department budget. They build their own budget that gets approved by the legislature. And they transport prisoners and people in custody. If we go to the next slide, I mentioned that sheriff can enter into contracts with the federal government. We're going to talk a little bit about two different contracts, right? The first one is the 287G agreement. This agreement specifically, it's an agreement between the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and local sheriff departments that deputize them to act as federal immigration agents in their community. This extra layer of responsibility, it's not what we would say is not paid by the federal government. If the sheriff opts into this kind of agreement, pretty much the sheriff and the department is paying for that. They are not getting money from the federal government, besides the beds that they may be using with immigrant detainees. There are 142 agreements across the United States between ICE and sheriffs. And there is one agreement left in Massachusetts, which is Barnstable County. We used to have more. We used to have Bristol County. Sheriff used to have a 287G agreement that was sort of dismissed by the Biden administration and by Secretary Mayorkas. The other agreement that we talk about, it's the IGSA, the Intergovernmental Service Agreement. This agreement specifically allows the sheriff department to sign an agreement and rent a section of the jail, or facilitate a section of the jail to a federal agency. The way how we see this deployed in Massachusetts is through those places that have an immigrant detainee section. Bristol used to have one. Franklin County Jail used to have one. We have just one left right now. Those literally what it does is that the Sheriff Department rents the space for ICE to use it. And this is really complicated, right? Because one of the things that we saw during the Trump administration was that immigrants that ended up being detained could be that they ended up in ICE custody just because they crossed a red light, or they were stopped by local police for a blinker that was not working. Because of these two agreements, they ended up being passed to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This, what we're seeing on the ground, provoked family separation. This certainly across the Commonwealth provoked the fact that entire immigrant communities became distrustful of cooperating with any kind of local or state enforcement. They were fearful of reporting crimes also. So the ACLU has advocated for the ending of these contracts. And these are two specific contracts that were extremely bad for the immigrant community, but also for each community. We were talking also about the sheriff bill creates their own budget, right? So if you take a look to this slide, we're seeing different budgets for the fiscal year 2021 coming from different counties, right? Hamden Sheriff Department is 90 million. If we take a look to the Berkshires, which based on this information, it's a little more than 21 million. One of the things that we're looking with this campaign is for people to get acquainted what that specific budget, what it's asking the budget for, what the budget is besides making the facility function. What are the programs that are being offered? Are the people detained in custody of the sheriff being able to communicate, to be able to access phone calls, to be able to access the visitations of family members, but also the visitation of their defense attorneys, right? When we're talking about that the sheriff, they oversee the conditions of house of correction. Conditions are a pretty wide word, right? So when we start talking about conditions, we're talking about physical conditions, medical treatment, including the access to vaccines, medical assisted treatment and addiction treatment, different programs, ESL programs, for example, reentry programs, access to visitors and attorneys, phone access, and how much the cost to phone access and being able to make a call involves, access to voting, and immigration detention conditions. This is really important, as you know. So for example, if we're talking about people in pretrial still can vote, right? So what we're looking for is that also pay attention to the level of commitment with creating accessibility for people incarcerated that still has the right to vote, for them to be able to vote. And this is not only being able to vote, but also having access to literature about candidates, having access to all the information for them to be able also to be able to give to vote in a well-informed manner. When we're talking about immigration detention conditions, this is specifically fundamental. One of the issues, specifically with immigration detainees, is that if they are able to pay for an attorney, they have access to an attorney. If an immigrant detainee doesn't have the money to pay for an attorney for immigration court, that person is going to go by themselves and do a pro se representation, right? This is not like in the criminal legal system. If you don't have enough money, you are going to get somebody assigned. That's not how immigration courts work. So what we're seeing this and what we're advocating too is that our community should pay attention. How legal services are being able to access the jail to do intake, to evaluate people in immigration detention in general. We live in the United States. We praise about the process, and we firmly believe that access to visitation by families, by legal counsel, it's key. What sheriffs don't do, and this is really important, because if anybody here would talk with a relative that lives in Arizona, in Texas, in California, the role of the sheriff would be extremely different to what is in Massachusetts. Totally different, right? So we need to set clear what sheriffs are not able to do in Massachusetts. They don't do community law enforcement. They are not out in the streets arresting people. They are not out in the streets patrolling, right? So that's really important. And one of the reasons that this form of this figure of the sheriff exists is because this is coming from the old institutional scheme, institutional way that Massachusetts used to be, that used to have county governments, right? Sheriff, they come from that structure, they remain from that structure, and that's the reason why we get county sheriff, right? But Massachusetts really transitioned from that, and that's the reason why we have them in each county. Excellent. So, sheriff election. Olivia asked you a pretty good question, which is how long the term? Most of you answered 6 years, some of you 4 years. Can you tell me the other elected official that you are aware of that also has a term of 6 years? Keelan, yes. I would add U.S. senators. U.S. senators are the ones who have 6-year terms, right? So when you put that in context, when somebody is going to the ballot every 6 years, becomes really important for the voter, for the community, to be able to understand where that person stands, their values, their commitments, and their ideas, right? In 2016, not a single incumbent lost his seat. 6 ran unopposed, 4 of them retired, and 4 had challengers but won by a very large margin. And this is one of the statistics when we do these presentations across the Commonwealth that at least shocks me greatly, right? In the last election, we're talking about 6 years ago, from all the people that went to vote in the Commonwealth, for every single person that went to vote, 670,000 people that voted, took the time to go and vote, they left blank the section of the sheriff. This is more than 500,000 voters, right? This is an incredible number. So what we're looking is our challenge as a community, our challenge as organizations doing voter education is to lower this number. We want people to be able to go vote informed, that their vote reflect their values and the values of their community and the community that they want to see. The blank ballots are from the general. Aaron, I saw that you asked. So that's really important. So now I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Olivia.
Thank you, Javi. We just want to take a second to zoom in now to Berkshire County so you can sort of see what has happened in Berkshire County over the last 30 years or so. And I don't think this is a surprise given some of the information that Javier just gave us. So over this time, there was only one, between 1974 and 2016, there was only one contested general election in Berkshire County, and that was the 1980 general election. And there was only one contested primary election, the 2010 Democratic primary. And the reason we wanted to highlight this for all of you is because that oftentimes when races are uncontested, we lack some of the really necessary public dialogue about what candidates believe and what the role is, what they see the role of the sheriff is in their communities. And so we're really thrilled that there are two candidates here to give both of their perspectives to both of you tonight. This is just a snapshot of all of the county sheriffs across the state. There are 14 sheriffs, one for each county. And the races that we've highlighted for you in yellow here are the contested races. And so we're really excited about the fall elections because there's going to be a lot of public dialogue about public dialogue between sheriffs, between voters and their sheriffs. And so we're excited to be building out this campaign with all of you. And I'm going to turn it back to Javi to introduce this really cool tool that we created. I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a few minutes, and then I'm going to actually bring it up so we can look at it together.
So this is incredible. This is really good. One of the things that you noticed when we were talking about the poll that we did, it's that there is a low percentage of people that they can name the sheriff. What we created is a tool. I would invite everybody to go to their phones if they have enabled the QR code reader. I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna take my phone and I selected the QR code reader. And I'm gonna use the QR code that I have here. And hold on, I'm having sort of tech issues, but I'm gonna do it again. So the first thing that you're gonna see is this landing page in your phone. That landing page is gonna display a list of towns and cities in the Commonwealth. When you select, if we can go to Pittsfield. When you scroll down and you select and look at the sheriff in Pittsfield, the tool is gonna show you a couple of things. It's gonna show you the current sheriff. It's gonna show you the candidates that are going to the ballot in 2022. And it's gonna show you a county map of the location of that county. And not only that, it's going to give you the direct link to the sheriff's office. We believe that streamlining this kind of information is essential for people. So I'm assuming that most of you have a lot of people that you know in Boston, you know in Essex, you know in Plymouth, you know Barnstable. We invite you to share this tool, to send this around. Olivia copy pasted on the chat the link to this lookup tool. So for people to be able to use it, to be able to go to the website of the sheriff's department where in the county, take a look how much access, how easy access is that website. Can I find in a couple of clicks the sheriff budget? Can I find easily the kind of reentry programs they are offering? Can I sort of, there is a way to get in touch with the sheriff department. All those things we think is important for people to be able to have those tools to streamline a way for them to be able to gather this information. It should not be difficult for the community to be able to get access to this kind of information. Hopefully you're gonna be able to use this tool. Hopefully we're gonna see this tool used widely, and we're really excited of deploying this tool in this campaign. This year, it's not only sheriff going to the ballot, right? We have US representatives, we have governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of the Commonwealth, attorney general, treasurer, auditor, the governor's council, a state senator and representative, district attorney. The ACLU has an ongoing campaign called What a Difference a DA Made, that the NAACP in the last DA campaign work with the ACLU, informing voters about the difference and the influence that the district attorney role has in the life of people in the criminal legal system, right? And the last one, we have sheriff going to the election. The primary is going to be September 6th, and the general election is November 8th. Liv.
Yes. All right. So this is our last slide before I turn it back over. We've got over 100 people on this forum right now, which is incredible. And I just wanted to name a couple of ways that folks could get involved if you're interested in engaging with this campaign beyond the forum tonight. And so this summer, we're going to be spending the next few months talking to voters about sheriffs and the role they play. And we're going to be doing that in a few different ways. Because it's going to be warm and nice out, one of the things we'll be doing is tabling out in communities across the state. So at local farmers markets, fairs, festivals, we're hoping to set up information tables at those kind of events to engage voters about what's happening in their counties. We're also going to be running a text and phone bank campaign to talk to voters across the state. And so I'm going to pop this link into the chat box for all of you. If you are interested in volunteering with our campaign, we would love to hear from you and get you engaged. And I'm going to pop that volunteer link into the chat box for all of you in just a moment. So that is the end of our presentation. And so I'm going to turn it back over to the NAACP. And thank you so much for being here.
Great, thank you so much. So the next section is thank you so much, Javier and Olivia. That was really great information. And I want to thank the two candidates that are here, Sheriff Bowler and Alf Barbalunga. We're going to go into the Q&A section with the two candidates. This is not a debate. This is a forum. And I'm going to start by allowing both of the candidates to have 2 minutes to share who they are and why they're running for office. And then we can take questions from our audience here. So if you would like to ask your question yourself, please raise your hand in the raise hand function and we will call on you and you can ask your question. If you would like one of us to ask your questions, Kamar is going to help me moderate the questions that are in the chat box. So you can put your questions in the chat box. So we will start with the incumbent, Sheriff Bowler. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. I appreciate it. And thank you, Javier and Olivia, for your presentation and educating the people in Berkshire County and across Massachusetts on the roles of the sheriff. My name is Tom Bowler. I've been a long life resident of Pittsfield, Massachusetts. I started my career in law enforcement in 1985 with the Pittsfield Police Department and was assigned to the Detective Bureau in about 1989. And in the year of about May of 2000, I left the Pittsfield Police Department and came over here to the Sheriff's Office under the previous administration or previous Sheriff Carmen Massimiano. And I was here for 18 months in charge of all security affairs. And I assisted with the transition from the old jail on 2nd Street to the new jail in 2001. I stayed until 2002. I actually missed the challenges and the street investigations that I was conducting with the Pittsfield PD and major crimes. So I went back to the Pittsfield Police Department and stayed there until 2010 when I announced my candidacy for the Sheriff's Office in 2010. I ran against Dan Bosley, who was a longtime House of Representative, member of the House of Representatives, and fortunately, I came out on top on that election. And I've been the current sheriff now since January 5th of 2011 until the present time.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to turn it over to Alf Barbalunga. Alf, if you want to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Alf Barbalunga. I appreciate the invitation via the ACLU and the NAACP. It's a pleasure virtually being here. Pretty cool technology. Basically, I'm a lifelong resident in Berkshire County. I've been involved in public safety, corrections, and law enforcement for 31 years combined. I'm 50 years old, for those that are interested. Past 25 consecutive years, I've had the pleasure of serving the Southern, the Central, and the Northern Berkshire communities. I'm the only candidate that's worked as a line correction officer, multiple unions. I've been a jail officer and a correctional officer and a deputy sheriff at 5 different facilities across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Had the privilege of working for 3 different sheriffs. I previously managed the Berkshire County Community Correction Center, that's currently named the Pittsfield Community Justice Support Center. 2007, well before the May of 2019 federal court decision, which mandated MAT treatment. We heard a little bit about that earlier. I created, in conjunction with Berkshire Health Systems, the Berkshire Partnership and Care Pilot Program, the wild acronym of BCICPP, and that was totally driven to combat opiate abuse. I've chaired the City of Pittsfield School Committee. At one time, without the presence of a superintendent, assistant deputy superintendent, I was responsible for administering basically a $67 million annual budget, a number of faculty and teachers. I was previously chair of the Massachusetts Probation Service Chief Association. Did some good work for 8 years there. When I started that adventure, only 28% of the leadership team is non-Caucasian or non-males. 8 years later, when I concluded my term, I'd accelerated that to 69%, including Black, Latino, and Asian representation. Also, I've been a lecturer and presenter regionally, locally, and nationally. Basically, our campaign is pretty straightforward. We're going to talk about these tenets: public safety, no more inmate deaths, no more escapes, general budgetary stewardship. There's going to be absolute fiscal discipline if we win this year. Rehabilitation, really just a triangle: substance use, education, and employment skills preparation. Return of our women. That process will start forthwith on January 4th. And our executive leadership team at the House of Correction and Jail right now, that's going to more closely reflect members of the union and our community at large. And lastly, out of the 6 platforms we've spoken publicly about, I publicly announced I'm going to self-impose term limits. Previous sheriff was in for 32 years. It appeared Tom Bowler wants to be in for at least 18. I've stated a maximum of 2 terms. If I'm honored enough to win, hopefully only 1 term, I basically conclude and get done what I'd like to do with my leadership team. And I want to say, to finish this out, everywhere I go in Pittsfield, we run a lot of people. We're working hard, and very consistently when I run into Bowler supporters, they're a little upset that we're running, and I try to dig in a pleasant way. And they basically say, Tom's a nice guy and he's done nothing wrong. And I don't disagree with any of that. I don't know him personally, but he appears to be a nice guy. I don't know if anything personally he's done wrong whatsoever. But in our opinion, that's a pretty low performance bar. As an elected official who's funded by Berkshire County taxpayers, in my opinion, in my team's opinion, that's why we're here, it's not good enough. This gentleman's had 12 years, 12 long years to try to accomplish what should have been accomplished. And we basically say, why are we going to give you 6 more years when you've had the 12 to do it? And really, there's only one agenda up there right now, which is disappointing as a public servant. That agenda from Tom and his executive team, which is now 16 strong,
I'm going to
post for another 6 years. All set. Thank you.
Thank you. This is not a debate, so I just want to clarify that. And we're going to go into the questions section. If you would like to ask Sheriff Bowler a question, please identify that. If you would like to ask both of the candidates, or if you'd like to ask Alf Barbalunga, please identify that. Yeah, I think that's it. So I am going to start with the question that was in the chat first. How is staffing level determined? And I'm assuming that is going to go to Sheriff Bowler.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, our staffing levels are determined based on the operations of the jail, the needs with the services, and how we operate here at the jail. I can run down the staffing, what we have right now. We currently have myself as the sheriff. I have a deputy or a superintendent. I have an assistant superintendent. I have 6 assistant deputy superintendents. And then I have captains, both primary and captains. I have a lieutenants and sergeants, and a whole host of line officers. And we also have educators, we have case managers, we have counselors for treatment. We have a full medical staff here based on our medical needs. We have a mental health team, a full mental health team that's here to deal with our mental health crisis. Just to let people know that we have 90% of our our incarcerated individuals here have some type of substance use disorder. And about 80% of those individuals also have SMI, which is a serious mental illness as well. So we also have a full maintenance staff here. If you take a look at this facility is 160,000 square feet. It sits on just about 18 acres of land, all which has to be maintained. So operationally, we have quite a bit. We also have a full-size kitchen for our inmate staff, the 163 inmates that we house here. We have a laundry process that takes place. Our inmates work in the laundry, they work in the kitchen, and they maintain the grounds as well. We also have, let me see, we have the 2nd Street facility. We run our civil process out of our 2nd Street facility. Within that 2nd Street facility, we also just initiated a new 2nd Street Second Chance program to assist our incarcerated population upon release to have the full wraparound services that they need to continue that positive structured path in the community. And that, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I think that was very comprehensive. Just also a reminder that there's going to be a ton of questions. I'm sure that we can cover programs and future programs.
Very good.
So, thank you. I'm going to go to Susan Lyman, who has raised their hand.
Hello, thank you. My question is for Mr. Barbalonga. It's not a pleasant one, but I need to address it. I'm a longtime attorney in Berkshire County. Actually had the wonderful experience of working with your dad. I believe predecessor Sheriff Carmen Masmiano is your relative. Is that correct? I can't hear Mr. Barbalonga.
The host keeps on muting me. So are you going to unmute me, or you expect me to do it on my own, Helen?
What I asked was, I believe that Sheriff Masmiano is your relative. Is that correct? He's related to you. He's passed, but.
Am I muted still?
No, you're not muted.
So Helen, are you going to unmute me, or will you allow me to unmute myself?
I have left both of you unmuted.
Because it said the host muted me, just FYI. So if you've given privileges away, just heads up. So Sue, thank you for the question. Carmen,
that's not my only question, and it's just a simple yes or no, because I do have to address something else. I believe that the predecessor sheriff is your relative. Is that correct?
Predecessor sheriff is my first cousin once removed, so that would quantify as my relative. That's correct.
Yes, thank you. All right. My big concern is the 1990 Boston Globe report having to do with patronage through the probation commissioner, John O'Brien, at the time. In fact, that you were named in that report as someone who was a recipient of that political patronage. And in fact, Commissioner O'Brien was suspended pending that investigation. You're aware, I believe, of course, of the allegations against you when you were a North Adams probation officer, that you were failing to show for your job. In fact, a judge recommended that you be fired from your job. Another judge recommended that you be—
Susan, is there a question in there?
Yes, that you be pushed for a reprimand. And yet nothing happened. And 3 years later, you were in fact promoted to be the chief probation officer in South County. Were those allegations against you concerning your failure to show for the job, in fact, fiction or fact?
Am I good to respond?
Yes.
Okay, so right out of the gate, thank you for the question, Susan. Number one, Jack O'Brien was the state commissioner official. He was prosecuted criminally at the state level and the federal level. Let's get full context, Sue. He was found not guilty at the state and federal level. That's the first thing. So anybody in this audience knows that. Secondly, in that situation in North Adams, I had basically the equivalent of an NDA while I'm an active employee. Now I'm not an active employee. So we're going to roll out on our website, which is barbalunga.com, barbalunga.com, that time period up there from 1997 to 1999. What I can tell you is this: I was never disciplined. I was never terminated. I was allowed to transfer to any office of my choosing, and I chose Berkshire Juvenile Court. My 3 supervisors there, the chief probation officer, a quasi supervisor, the clerk magistrate, and the presiding judge, all said independently after 13 months of service there, I was one of the best employees they've ever come across. And like I said, I'm going to be able to discuss this a little more in depth as the summer goes on. And it's really a tale of this, Susan, which you may appreciate. It was an 82-year-old manager, supervisor, my boss, getting abused in a political climate by a judge who wanted him out. And it was my boss from the commissioner's office saying, don't tolerate this. And it was a question of me stepping up and doing the right thing and me being somewhat punished for it and being put through the grinder. But at the end of the day, you hear about integrity a lot. Real integrity is when you step up as a 25-year-old man against, by the way, you had it a little wrong. There were 2 judges gunning for my supervisor and then subsequently me. And when you stand up against that type of pressure, you either crumble or it's like coal that turns into a diamond. And I basically succeeded. And I'll tell you something right now, politically, that was some hardcore politics, and that was a wake-up call as a 25-year-old man. But I can tell you up in that office, that supervisor, God bless him, and the only reason I'm going to say his name is because he's passed away, T. William Lewis, AKA Red, a legend in Northern Berkshire. After he left, I came over to his house and he cried and was so grateful about what I persevered for a 9-month period on his behalf. I, again, was allowed to transfer, no termination, no discipline. My colleague resigned, went on to further his efforts with state service. And my boss there obviously retired, and I would say under unbelievable pressure. I'm proud of that time period. If I could go back, were there any missteps? Perhaps as a 25-year-old, but I did the right thing. It was uncomfortable. And there's a reason why I wasn't terminated or there's no discipline levied. There's a good reason. We're going to talk a little bit more about it this summer. That's what a true leader does.
All right. So I'm going to enlist the help of my colleague Kumar here, just so we want to make sure that we have time for everybody. And so we may institute a time limit. So if you can keep your answers to like 3 minutes or less, otherwise Kumar's going to go around muting people. And I'm sure there's a lot of good questions in here, and I just want to make sure that none of them are personal in nature. And I,
Well, that ship sailed, Helen.
That, I think that this is a really important conversation to be having. And so I'm going to go to Meg Basong next. Sorry, Meg.
Thanks, Helen. I am a former commissioner on the Berkshire County Commission on the Status of Women and Girls. And in 2019, the commission held a hearing with incarcerated women in the Western Mass Women's Correctional Facility. Women from Berkshire County, Sheriff Bowler was there. What we heard in that commission hearing is that the housing of women at the Western Mass facility leads to a great deal of hardship for those women as well as their families in terms of family separations, people's ability to visit. The explanation is that there's a lot more programming and a lot more facilities available at the Western Mass facility. But the feedback from the folks we spoke to is that on return to the community, there are very few services available for them in the county. They're often still having to travel to Springfield for various kinds of meetings and appointments. My question is for both candidates, which is, what are your plans about how to better serve women who are part of the incarcerated population, Berkshire County's incarcerated population? And do either of you have plans to return the housing of those folks to the Pittsfield facility?
So I'm going to start with Sheriff Bowler.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Since that 2000 meeting, we have recently enhanced over the last 2 years, a year and a half. We have Officer Lindsay Maynard, who is our correctional case officer or case manager, who is the one servicing the females with those wraparound services with the Chicopee Center back here to the community. Those services have been enhanced quite a bit. We do understand that there has been a hardship at times for these individuals with their families. A lot of these individuals that have been incarcerated are homeless. They also have substance use disorders. And when you talk about recovery, the last individual or the last people who really become involved in the recovery process are the family members, because those individuals with the substance use disorders are dealing with a whole host of issues with their addiction and their mental health issues as well. So I still stand by that the services that these individuals are receiving at the Chicopee Center are far greater and far more than we have here. We intend to use the new initiative of the Second Street Second Chance that is available also for the women as well. So the wraparound services and the service providers that are going to be on hand at the Second Street facility will be available for these women as well as the males upon release. The one thing I want to mention too also is this past January, the Women's Chicopee Center has become a national model through the ACA, the American Correctional Association, for their role in the services and the programs. There was an audit done by the ACA and they had 100% compliance and became a national model for their facility and what they offer to those female incarcerated individuals.
Thank you. Alf?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be pretty basic about this. We were absolutely sold out in 2014. This serviced one person at the time, Sheriff Ash out of Hampden County. And let me be crystal clear on the record. Sheriff Ash is a legend among sheriffs, and he did wonderful work, set up a wonderful office for Sheriff Kochi. But that was good for one person in one community and one sheriff's office, Hampden County, simply that. Our women who are always criminologically at a disadvantage need their support services here. We have 21 million reasons, which is $21 million to support them. They were shipped down. You can imagine what that looks like when it's a 2.5 to 3 hour round trip. Their family, due to what I just said about demographics and economic disadvantages and racial disparity, can't visit them. We don't have any public transportation that's worthwhile out in Western Massachusetts, as you may agree. When the sheriff sent them down there, just an FYI, in 2011, there was a massive civil lawsuit with inappropriate behavior by correctional staff there, videotaping women down there in compromising situations. He knew about it. Again, he has nothing to do with that. That's a Hampden County issue. But it's just like, it's as close as this. I feel more comfortable if I'm watching my kids in my own house than if they're 5 blocks away and someone else is watching them. That's just the purity of it. And more importantly, the telephone prices mysteriously were jacked up for those collect calls back to the house. So these women that need that one call a week of perhaps sanity, often the recipient couldn't afford it. That's why we said forthwith earlier when I laid out the 6 campaign platforms. That's one of our most important, to return the women forthwith. And let me say lastly, and again, I'm going to try to make these brief because I know how this is playing out. It was insulting to our clinical professionals here, educational, substance use, job skills, that basically it was explained, we don't have the horsepower here to service those females and women. We're going to send them down to Hampden County because only they have those experts. I find it insulting. We have wonderful clinicians out here. Unfortunately, they weren't resourced out for this. We have the room, obviously, and we have the money. That's a fact. On a final note on this just gives you a little bit of a heads up what we're talking about budget-wise. 10 years ago, we had 364 population at the sheriff's office with females. Today, we have about 137 as the count. It's actually probably less. It's a little less than that. Right out of the gate, that shows you, unbelievably, our budget's at 22 million right now, and 10 years ago was at 15 million. Also, as I touched upon really quickly, just to show you how this machine thrives, we had 8 executive team members, including the sheriff, 10 years ago. Now we have 15. And unbelievably, in the history of Berkshire County, this past fourth calendar quarter, October or November, for the first time ever, Sheriff Bowler just hired a special sheriff to the tune of $78,000 a year. It's never been done in history.
I'm going to stop. I think you're moving away from the original intent of the question, which was bringing the women back to this area. So I just want to redirect that back here. I'm going to go to.
Can I just, Helen, can I just comment about one thing? Real quick.
Sure.
The reason for the facility at Chicopee was not to fill Sheriff Ash's facility. It started in the mid-2000s when state legislators and the 4 Western Mass sheriffs at that time took a look through a number of feasibility studies that were taking place, that this was the best way to fill the needs and service the needs of the female population in one located facility. Okay. The legislators and the 4 Western Mass sheriffs are the ones who came up with this idea. It was the best idea to give the women the services that they need that are gender specific for them. That's when the legislators appropriated $50 million to do this and build this facility. It wasn't until about 2012, the Berkshire section was completed. And in 2014, after another year-long process of discussing how we were going to do this, it wasn't just a slingshot. They weren't ripped out of this community. There was a long process in preparing the females down to that facility. And to say that we didn't have the technical.
Right. So I'm gonna.
Okay, go ahead.
I just really want to be fair to both parties, and if please stay on the question itself. There's a lot of other questions. And so I know that this is a good opportunity to get in front of the voters, and we want you to be able to do that, but please stay on the question that was asked. We're really not looking for a debate here.
Helen?
What's
Can
that?
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he had an opportunity to respond. Let me just say one thing. That's not accurate. Franklin County.
So I'm going to end this.
Franklin County brought.
All right.
Franklin County brought their women back.
So again, the NAACP, ACLU, and the League of Women Voters have given you this opportunity to come before our voters, right? And we have invited you to our space, and we're asking that you are able to be respectful, and this is not a debate. I'm going to keep emphasizing that this is not a debate. This is an opportunity for our membership to get to know you better. And so I'm asking that you stay on the question that's asked and be succinct. So I'm going to go to a question that's in the chat here from Kellen. Says, our ACLU friends mentioned that sheriffs are responsible for immigration enforcement. Do you plan on cooperating with ICE or continuing to work with ICE if they are active in the Berkshires? So we'll start with Alf.
Hello. Who's the question from?
Helen O'Brien.
Helen. Thank you, Helen. So
Kellen.
obviously I'm not, pardon?
Kellen, not Helen.
K-E-L-E-N. Very good. Yeah, I can only see small snippets of the screen. So right now, as my position before I had to take an unpaid leave of absence for this for 3 to 5 months, we had specific trial court guidelines. So we're state employees about what we could allow to do with the federal ICE situation. It's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell. And there's currently federal lawsuits and state lawsuits about that. What I would say is this: I fully believe we should maximize that facility. It is absolutely being underutilized. So while I may not endorse federal inmates or detainees using those beds, here's what I would do. Number one, as you already know, I'm going to bring our women back immediately. Number two, what I'm going to do is bring our juveniles back. They will have their own pod with correct legislation. They're not going to be shipped out to Springfield anymore. They're not going to be shipped out to Cape Cod. They're going to be in Berkshire County, much like the women population, a at-risk group. And three, what I would do, we will tweak legislation and have our Section 35s go there. People that are really in need, that are having some critical short-term problems for the most part.
So I'm going to redirect you to the ICE question.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to please answer the question that's being asked. Sheriff Bowler.
Yeah, can you repeat the question again, Helen, please?
The question is, so our ACLU friends mentioned that sheriffs are responsible for immigration enforcement. Do you plan on cooperating with ICE or continuing to work with ICE if they are active in the Berkshires?
No, we don't work with ICE now, and we don't plan on in the future. If a individual is incarcerated here and has charges here, but he also has a detainer, an ICE detainer on him, prior to that individual going to court, we will notify ICE that that individual may be released from court, and it's their responsibility to respond to the courthouse upon his release to apprehend him on the detainer. We do not hold detainees here for ICE, and we will, basically, I took an oath in office to follow and to uphold the laws of the Commonwealth. Other than that, no, we do not plan to continue working or never have worked with ICE.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go to, just so folks know, I'm going to go to Jean Kempthorne next, just she's been waiting, and then I'll go to Jean, who has raised her hand. So Jean Kempthorne's question is for Alf. Sorry, I have to scroll back. What do you most want to accomplish in your first term? Alf, you're muted.
I thought you were going to unmute me, Helen. On my first term, we want to get in, we want to do a full fiscal audit, and we want to redirect how this money's being spent. Really what it gets down to this, as you kind of can tell what I'm alluding to, we have a massively high amount of executive team officials. Unfortunately for all of us, in 12 years, we have not one person of color on this team, not one. We've gone from 7 to 16 or 8 to 15. We've doubled them. There's a wonderful minor league system in there, aka the union, that has some wonderfully talented people, including women, in our opinion, that should have been promoted throughout the last 12 years. In lieu of that, we have rock stars across the state and the country that could have come in some of these leadership positions, and that's not happened. So that's a two-for question. We're going to see how the money's being spent. We're going to redirect it specifically for three things: inmate programming, population there, substance use specialization to mitigate those issues, and then third, really career development. For example, there's a hydroponics program up there. And again, if there's something good, I'm going to be the biggest proponent of it. From what I understand, we've done a lot of research. We've inquired to speak to some of the authorities on it there. They haven't responded yet, but we're still hoping for it. But that seemed to be a great program, legitimately a great program. Haven't done a full accounting on it yet. But what I don't get out of that program is not one person we have come upon yet has actually gotten a job from it. They do some wonderful work. They grow some wonderful food. It serves some persons in need and the clientele up there. But we'd like to evolve that program where actually they get a certification, and once they hit the street, they actually can be employable by that with some other mechanical, electrical, plumbing, things of that nature. That's really where we see a huge void, is preparing these people for the street. Because the bottom line is this: nobody's up there for more than 30 months. Most people are up there 1 month, 5 months. I'm sure Tom Bowler can tell you what the mean average is, perhaps 8 months. They're coming out into the community. They're your neighbor, they're your colleague, your boss, your subordinate, whatever it may be, and they're not being prepared accordingly. That money's being spent on executive team salaries, Hummers, snowmobiles, chainsaws. It goes on. And these are things that we're going to start rolling out throughout the summer. And then if you like how it's being spent, I'm probably not the right candidate for you. But if you think it's inappropriate and it should be spent on the inmates to get them back into society, I am your ability to have some change. And that's the answer to my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to go, Jean put their hand down, so and put their question in the chat. So I'm just going to go to that question. So for Sheriff Bowler, why has it taken 2 terms and an election year for you to start this wrap around program you spoke of?
Different versions of it.
We've had different versions. Thank you for the question, but it's always been in place. The wraparound services have always been in place. I have 5 case managers that work for me inside this facility to prepare our incarcerated population to go back out into the community. I have asked the legislator time and time again each year to give me 4 street workers. Those are case managers that work on the street to make sure that these individuals who are coming back out to the community are able to get to their job interviews, to get to their doctor's visits, to get to their AA meetings, to get to their medical visits. I have never been able to get the funding to do that have the street workers, nor do I have the staff to do it. But those services have always been there. And it hasn't taken us 2 terms to accomplish this. We continue on a daily basis to find people jobs. We've had a work release program pre-COVID with LTI Smart Glass, Samco Industries, Cavallero Plastics, Unistress. 6 inmates would walk down our driveway to go to Unistress and come back at night. This allows these people to not only get a paycheck every week, but also to save money to have rent for housing when they get out and to continue those services. These services have always been in place. This is now a different version with the Second Street program. This is going to be hands-on, one-stop shopping. Service providers will be in the same location, in the same building to help those individuals in their needs.
All right. I'm going to go to a question from Michael for Alf. What does absolute fiscal discipline mean to you? Is it realistic, actionable promise? Please be very specific. What are the areas you feel have been overspent on, and how specifically are you planning to reduce spending?
Thank you. Well, yeah, I'll dig right in. So Tom just talked about a program, a previous predecessor. I think it came online in 2014, 2015 at the Second Street facility. An absolute disaster. This starts like this, and this is the usual stick. You get the grant. And again, some of the people that work on this grant are great, internal employees and volunteers on the outside. And then what happens is you build the empire. You hire 6 or 8 employees. You produce no product whatsoever. And I'm specific to Second Street. We're going to be specific. And then what happens is the grant runs out. There's no deliverables whatsoever. No individuals are using the program. And now what you do is some people lose their job, but you absorb some of the ones politically into the House of Correction and jail. And now your budget increases for payroll. It's basically a tool that's been used in perpetuity, but Tom's done a great job accelerating it. So what I'll say right now is we're going to shutter that program, actually, the one he's talking about. That grant came inbound in February. There's not one person there again. It's the same thing every time. And what we're going to do is return that building to the community. The community. Morningside community has been an absolute disservice done to it. That was part of what happened when the House of Correction and Jail, the state-of-the-art facility came online that Tom talked about, that he was originally hired for 2 years to help with the transition. That was the deal. We have a physical plant that can accommodate everything. We return Morningside neighborhood to the community, where there's an elementary school next door that doesn't have to see the ebbs and flows there. And we do something where we make that a mixed housing facility. And the problem is some of the people in that community don't have the political oomph to be able to fight back against this. And furthermore, the answer to your question specifically is probably not well known here. Tom had an office at the Berkshire Eagle building until last year. Again, an office that was not needed. A Taj Mahal plush office, unbelievably. You're going to have to ask him, but we'll get into it later this summer, how much he was spending annually on that lease. Zero need for it. Zero need for Second Street right now. All that programming can be done up at the House of Correction. He didn't need to go into the Eagle building to hang out for the day. He could have gone up to the House of Correction and seen his men and women that work for him that have been yearning for that leadership. And that's what we're going to do. So those are some specific answers. Most people, when I said we're going to shutter the program, they were a little shocked and awed because, well, that's anti-programming, but that's not the case. We're going to deliver better programming.
Helen, what's going on here with the candidate? This is not a debate. I'm not allowed to rebuttal on any of this, and he's factually wrong on so many issues. So we either turn this over and get it.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to the next questions. This is a pleasure. So, so we're getting a lot of questions in the chat right now about follow-up questions for ICE. we have questions about, hold on. Can you clarify your ICE answers? So Sheriff Bowler, you do indeed notify ICE if there's a detainer, and for Alf, your answer was unclear on this question. So people would like to have clarifying answers for this. I'm going to start with Sheriff Bowler.
Yes, we do notify them. If a detainee is here on an ICE and has a ICE detainer, we will notify ICE that that person is here. If they do not respond, then that individual is released. Oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes they have other charges. If those charges, which are local, we will let the ICE know that there's local charges, and it's their responsibility to show up to the courthouse if those charges are abolished or dismissed. And it's up to them to respond to the courthouse and see if they want to detain that individual. We do not detain anybody here solely on an ICE detainee or detainer.
Alf?
Helen, you got me covered, or you want me to do it myself? I'm a mute.
So we are muting. It is not me muting folks, but we are muting folks if you are not answering the question, if you are going off topic, if you are if you're going too long and not just, you know, but
Someone
everything else is you are unmuting yourself.
Right. Yeah, Helen, somebody is muting me. If it's not you, it's not me. So just an FYI, okay?
Right. So we have other host members, other members of the NAACP team are moderating and muting and unmuting folks. But if you are going too long on your answers, or you're not staying to the point, or you are going completely off topic, we will mute you. And that is
that's not the scenario. I'm trying to begin my answer and I keep on getting muted. Just FYI, okay? So I would say there's three parts to this question in my career currently. We do not notify ICE if we have a federal detainee in custody. So that's the first part, the takeaway. The second part is and that would be if we know the person's coming in the trial court probation service to begin with. Secondly, if the individual comes in without us knowing, which happens occasionally, can be an arrest on the street, we do not notify ICE. Third part of that, though, is we also will not get involved if ICE affects an arrest outside our facility. We won't stymie that. They're allowed to proceed.
All right.
Hopefully
So I'm going to go to a question from Fernando. They ask, this is a question for both candidates. Considering the county's Hispanic population rose by 56% over the last decade in this county, do you have any outreach community plans for the Latin community in the Berkshires? And I'll start with Alf. Alf, you are muted.
If I may just take a quick moment to explain the mute function. At the end of a response from either of the candidates, I then mute you. In order to begin speaking and be heard by attendees at the forum tonight, you then have to click unmute when I click ask you to unmute.
Okay, so my understanding is I have to initiate the unmute function. Thank you, Kamar. So basically, yeah, we're going to recruit. Again, as I said, executive leadership team at the House of Correction has 0 Latino, 0 Black, only 2 women so far. That's inappropriate. Even internally, I think we only have less than 3% out of 266 current staff. Not appropriate. So we're going to start a cadet system where we reach out in the middle schools and say, hey, here's a wonderful career, the Berkshire County Sheriff's Office. We'd like you to consider it. 10 years earlier, you need to stay on the straight and narrow. We're going to run some programming and basically have like a farm system, like a single A, double A, triple A, to get these people, young men and women, we'll say children, something that inspires them. We see this at the police level, cadets at the police level. So that's something we're thinking about. At the executive team level, we would also look externally. And again, let me say right now, there's some men and women inside that have been bypassed for promotions time after time after time on these promotional exams, which are these verbal exams, which really are arbitrary and capricious, because you can score
Oh,
number one.
I'm gonna stop you. I'm gonna be really very strict about, please answer the question itself. That is it. So if you are not answering the question, I'm gonna ask you to stop speaking and Kamar will mute you.
I muted myself. Thank you.
Sheriff Bowler.
Yes, currently right now in our facility, we have nine Hispanic employees. And just there's one individual I have to give some kudos. I'm not going to mention her name, but we have a recruit that just came out of our academy, a female. And the one thing we've noticed over the last several academies over the last few years, our female staff members are absolutely tremendous individuals, and they fly through the academy. And we have a couple of them who've won the Sheriff's Award in the academies. And
So I'm going to stop you because that is no longer answering the question about your outreach for the Latin community in Berkshire County. So I'm going to go on to, I told you all, I'm going to be very strict with this. So I'm going to go on to question, sorry, by Veronica Fenton. For both candidates, what personal work, study, training, and reflection have you engaged in to understand the history of race and incarceration in our country and in our region? And I will start with Sheriff Bowler.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Let me start back from going way back into the my entire police career, starting in 1985. As a patrol officer and a beat cop, I always had the west side of Pittsfield. I have built tremendous relationships with the individuals in the Black community as well as the white community on the west side. These are individuals, many of whom I have arrested, but also many that those same families where I had to arrest some of those individuals, I also went to their funerals or members of their families' funerals. So I have built many and forged a number of relationships with the Black and community down on the west side over my years as a police officer. And to this day, these are relationships and friendships that I've had to this day. I don't know if it's actually I've done any training. When I grew up in the 70s, I went to Crosby Junior High School, which was one of the most diverse junior high schools in the city at the time. I then went on to Taconic High School, another diverse high school at that time, and then went on to American International College in the early 80s in Springfield, which was very diverse. A lot of my friends, associates, colleagues, athletes, friends were all of people of color and from different cultures. So it's never been really any training, Veronica, that I've gone to, but it's just my own personal life and who I am as a person and how I treat people throughout in this society.
Oh.
Here we go, right? I appreciate that question for sure. I mean, the bottom line is you either walk the walk, you talk the talk. So I've been involved in the gathering since got some feedback on Renee. Here we go. I've been involved in the gathering, Pitt Park, Durant Park, going back to 1997, sponsoring basketball teams. They're participating, donating to charities. I'm on site. Anybody in the community knows that. That's the bottom line. You can be the judge if you've seen Tom Bowler out at these events. Nothing needs to be said about that. Secondly, the trial court started what's called Cultural Awareness Week 5 years ago now. I was the first Western Mass Cultural Proficiency Champion, and with that came training. And really, at the end of the day, it's allowing for opportunities for people of color that are disadvantaged through a systemic system that does not allow for promotional processes. That's what it really gets down to. This scenario wasn't so much for onboarding, it was for promotions. And like I said earlier, when I was president of the Mass Chief Probation Officer Association, in 8 years, I took that from 29% to 68%. That's a tangible thing. I also won statewide, almost 6,200 people were considered, 6,200. I won statewide Cultural Diversity Award in 2021 and 2019. That's what you call walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Something I'm extremely proud of. That's what it gets down to. And if we get into the sheriff's office, our executive leadership team is going to represent those ideals. That's the bottom line.
All right, so I'm going to go to a question from the chat from Rachel. So Rachel asks Sheriff Bowler, please expand on the programs created through your innovation and the outcomes that produce safety nets. And also please expand on the hydroponics program. It's separate funding and it's a positive effect. And its positive effect in our Berkshire County communities.
Okay, there we go. Yes, the hydroponic program, first of all, foremost, people should understand that this is a nonprofit entity that I have. I have a board of directors tied into this aquaponics program. They raised over $600,000 to build this. We did not build it with state funds. The inmates that do work in that hydroponics program also have a STEM curriculum attached to it. So they're learning a whole host of education curriculum regarding growing fish, how to grow the organic food that's in there, that's produced there. We just recently received, because of the money that was raised for this, we also understand that the utilities cost for this, the state came up, the governor came up, the lieutenant governor came and looked at it. We had an open house. Our legislators toured the facility and they appropriated $100,000 or $150,000 to keep us going with this program. To my opponent's point of view, whether or not people have been able to find jobs with this program, it doesn't matter whether they find jobs. These individuals have an opportunity to leave the jail, go out into this hydroponics and work in a structured environment, learn while they're there as well. And they're having an opportunity to build their self-esteem and their self-confidence in themselves. This is what these individuals need, and some work skills as well. Some of the other programs that we have, well, let's see, when we talk about skill building, we have a manufacturing program. I mentioned the work release programs we had with LTI Smart Glass and others. We have a manufacturing and a welding program. I just attended a graduation. This is through Berkshire Community College as an affiliate with this program. I just attended a graduation of 7 individuals that, Helen, you're going to cut me off?
I am. So I have pinned Kamar as well. And if Kamar is flashing an orange sign, that means wrap it up. If he's flashing a red sign, that means stop talking.
Okay.
All right. And you're going to be muted. Sorry. And if people can, there are a lot of people private messaging me. If you could either put it in the chat and Kamar is going to pull it out, or if you want to direct message him, I can't, I'm having a hard time kind of following all the questions in the chat, but super excited that everyone is so invested in this conversation. I actually have a question from Kamar. Kamar, to both candidates, what role does the Sheriff's Department play in lowering incarceration rates and in addressing the determinants of health that can create risk of incarceration? So I'll start with Alf.
All right, so this is tricky because I just unmuted myself and it muted again, exactly. So yeah, there's definitely a correlation, Kamar. It is our responsibility to reduce recidivism. And again, I've talked about it. It's the triangle. Number 1, deal with any substance abuse issues. And that's not being done right now. We have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful program at 163 4th Street. And the deal was that the sheriff was supposed to provide 1/3 of all the participants there. In 12 years, we haven't sent one person there. It's pretty much outrageous. 2, we need to deal with any of the issues. There's health issues that can be mitigated. It's a great facility to get that done. And there's some wonderful medical staff up there for the record. So we have to dig into that. And 3, like we talked about, there has to be that job training. It's so critical. In before that piece often is the educational component. Unfortunately for all of us, there was a 2-year window from 19 to 21, not one GED was achieved, not one. A lot of money went at this effort and not one. So that's an issue. We need those GEDs, and then we roll into the education. Like I said, Tom's on point. Hydroponics is a wonderful program. I'm a little confused, and we're doing some deeper dives about payroll on it and how much it costs with utilities and things of that nature, because there is a lot of grant money goes towards it, but that's not the whole picture. But I vehemently disagree. One takeaway on this, he stated on the record, it's not important for these people to receive jobs from it. Categorically disagree with that. These people should have jobs lined up. It could be something as the marijuana clinics throughout Berkshire County, which are prevalent, are probably looking for people that have that skill set. And if we connect them, that question, that reduced recidivism, because you're not going to go commit another crime when you have that educational background, and when you have that substance abuse use fixed, and when you have that job lined up.
All right. So just a reminder, if Kumar is flashing orange, that means wrap it up. If he's flashing red, you're going to get muted very shortly. Sheriff Bowler, if you would like to answer.
Yes, Helen, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. So the question is from Kumar to both candidates. What role does the Sheriff's Department play in lowering incarceration rates and addressing the determinants of health that can create risk of incarceration?
Medical.
Okay. So yes, incarceration or the substance abuse programs that we have an RSAT residential treatment program here. We have a full medical team that's here as well. Our job here is to create a stronger, healthier, safer community. All the programs we have in place here allow those individuals to return back into the community a much better person when they leave than when they came in. With the wraparound services we have, as far as will help reduce the recidivism, the job employments, the housing that we provide for people. All these things play a key role in creating that safer, healthier, and stronger community. Each one of these individuals is a member of our community. There's a lot of individuals here that with serious crimes, but there's also some good people that are here based on whatever negative influence brought them to us. When we can get them back out into the community, living a positive, structured lifestyle, have a job, have a housing, a roof over their head, wraparound services. This helps us create that stronger, healthier community, and it gives them a quality of life that they deserve.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Laura, who has their hand raised.
Hi, I actually, I can go onto the camera too. I was, my question I put in the chat, but I was a volunteer at the House of Corrections well before COVID, and I taught math and applied math for guys who wanted to be involved with construction. I developed a curricula for applied math for things like reading utility bills and understanding car mileage and things like that. I knew there was a shortage of people to be advocates or to help people be counselors when they leave. I offered to do anything that I could to help the inmates return. It was incredibly meaningful, satisfying work. And then the program ended, and this was before COVID, and I was never able to understand. I mean, I can understand in some ways why it ended, but I had a really hard time figuring out why is it that concerned citizens in the community can't be involved in a better way and in a positive way with the House of Corrections and with the inmates offering things. And they don't necessarily have to lead to jobs. I think it can be art. It could be music. There are a lot of different things that can be done that enrich the lives and might inspire other talents. But I don't understand why this program stopped, or if it was somehow or other I was misinformed, but why we can't go back to having volunteers. So that's, I guess, in part for if the sheriff can help me understand what happened to the program and why it ended, that would be great. And if there are plans.
All right, Sheriff Bowler.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I'm not too sure. I don't understand or remember why it was discontinued, but as of pre-COVID, we have, since COVID, we have stopped all the volunteers coming in for the safety and security of the inmates here as well, and for the staff. We are looking at now, we just recently, as of July 1st, the state, the DPH allowed us to go to optional masks. We've been wearing masks for the last 2 years and still disinfecting every day. But we are going to reinstitute the volunteers coming back in. We've already started doing some of that now, but we are going to have those programs back on track. They were very meaningful. It's meaningful to the inmates. We know that. They appreciate and love to have people come in and visit with them and talk to them and help them with their needs. And so we want to continue that process as well.
So I'm going to go to a question from Rebecca. For both candidates, it was stated that approximately 90+% of incarcerated individuals have an identified substance use disorder. What will you do to help combat the opioid epidemic and increase success with recovery upon release, different than what has been done previously? So we'll start with Alf.
Well, it's a foundational issue. The first real problem was this sheriff's office was the last in the state to come online with medically assisted treatment. So I'm not sure why, but Tom and his executive team basically on the record, there's video, there's articles, stated that addiction is a choice. It's not a disease. So when you tackle it that way, we have a lot of problems. And the first there's 14 sheriff's offices in the state, so everybody's aware. First sheriff's office that really rolled in all components of MAT, medically assisted treatment, was in 2016. The rest came along in 2018. And guess what? We were the only one of the 14 that still wasn't involved. And if you go back, and again, these state stats are readily available through these years with the opioid abuse, we were dropping 40 bodies a year, 60, 30 throughout that time frame of people dying. Now, I'm not saying this is correlated to who was a detainee or an inmate at the time, but it just shows you generally how horrific the conditions were. Tom and his team only subscribed to medically assisted treatment because of one reason, and one reason only. There was a federal lawsuit that came inbound in 2019, and that's why they jumped on.
So Al, I think the question is, what will you do that's different than what is currently being done?
Sure. So what we're going to do is the MAT, so there's a lot of components of MAT. Our experience is going to be much more robust. We're going to accentuate some of the healthcare providers in there. They have a great team, as I said already. And then what we're going to do is we are going to utilize the Pittsfield Community Justice Center. That's the 163 4th Street facility. And we're going to have a classification system and the employee base that can be trusted to let these men and women out of the House of Correction if I get the women back. Remember, that's predicated upon they're still 3 hours away round trip, and they're going to utilize this service. So what that looks like basically is you're classified appropriately, you leave the House of Correction, you utilize this facility all day long, and the lion's share of this facility is substance use issues. And we arm you with that skill set not to reoffend or reuse. And then you go back at night, or perhaps you go to some secondary housing. That's what we would do regarding that. Thank you.
Sheriff Bowler.
Thank you, Helen. Somebody has to go back and do their research because they have it all wrong. There was a pilot program that rolled out. 7 sheriffs took advantage of the pilot program. And after that, there was a few of us that were left on the MAT program. We were one of the first ones out of the remainder of the sheriffs to receive the medically assisted treatment. It's a rigorous process. You have to go through DPH in order to get a federal license to administer methadone. We were already currently up to that point providing Vivitrol and Suboxone or Subutex. And then once we got the federal license, we now administer the medically assisted methadone as well. As I stated, that was a rigorous process. We were one of the first ones out of the remainder sheriffs to do that. And we're going to continue that program. Keep in mind, an individual comes in who is receiving medically assisted treatment on the outside, oftentimes come in and do not want to be medically assisted treated anymore. They work themselves off of it. We make sure that based on our mental health team and our medical team, that is the right process for them. We educate them on the services that we have, and we either continue the process or we wean them off. But it's done under the care of our medical staff and our mental health team as well.
Again, I stand by my comments for fact checking.
So we're not going to do a back and forth response. So I have a question from Kellen O'Brien for Sheriff Bowler. What are the Sheriff Department's current policies and practices related to transgender inmates? Additionally, what types of trainings do staff receive about gender identity, and who is it facilitated by?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, we've received a lot of training regarding the transgender. A lot of that's taken place right at our intake process. We acknowledge what the state and federal guidelines are when it comes to transgenders, and we continuously in our in-service training train our staff equally, our staff throughout that whole process.
So I'm going to go to a question from Darcy Sosa. Can both candidates please explain again how they will do outreach and communicate with the Hispanic community? I will start with Alf. Sorry.
Got me again. Hi, Darcy. So as I said previously, we're going to develop a cadet system going to the school system, that there's a some great job opportunities at that institution if you stay on the straight and narrow. Secondly, we are going to advertise more proficiently for these jobs. Thirdly, we're going to promote internally, so our men and women inside that are doing a good job, mostly union employees that are of Latino nature, understand that they have a fair shot at being promoted, and it's not going to be an arbitrary and capricious system, and it's not going to be subverted from external people coming inbound that are taking those jobs. So that's basically some of our ways to mitigate the lack of those employment opportunities in the community, in the Hispanic community.
Sheriff Bowler?
Yes. Pre-COVID, we've held a number of job fairs and teamed up with a number of other entities in law enforcement and public safety that have been having job fairs. We will continue to do that now that COVID is, I'm sure that those are going to be reinitiated again, and we will continue. And we advertise constantly. We're advertising for jobs all the time in our security field, in our mental health field, in our medical field. This is a very stressful job. As our individuals who work in the housing units, we have people that come in and find out that this isn't the job for them. So we'll continue our outreach the way we've always done. We advertise continuously, and we'll continue to also go to job fairs as well.
You know, again, I'm going to own this. I'm not sure I answered the question. I don't think I answered Darcy's question. I don't think she's talking about employees, perhaps. I think she's just talking about.
So if you are muted, please don't unmute yourself.
No problem.
So the next question is from Jean. Jean asks, for Sheriff Bowler, I recently saw a post that you have only promoted one Black correctional officer in your 12 years. Can you explain why that is?
A recent post by whom?
That information is not shared. That is just the question that we have.
Okay. Since I've been here, we have a captain who just retired, who was a person of color. I had a female who just retired, was the first Black female to retire from the Berkshire County Sheriff's Office. I have 2 sergeants right now that are both Hispanic. I have 9 Black staff right now, and they are, I have Jason Kyler, who is our executive director. He was our director of reentry services, who is now going to be the director of, he's the executive director of our new initiative at the Second Street Second Chance program. Jason is a person of color.
So I have another question that is, what are both candidates' personal stance on abortion? And would you arrest a woman coming to Massachusetts for reproductive health care, even if Congress outlaws abortion on a national level? So I just, I do want to just mention that this, sorry, I'm just going to go. Okay, so I'm just going to let this go. But it is 7:45, and so I think that we'll take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up. But we'll start with Alf.
Yeah, so let's keep it fully real. For me, that's a close one. I'm Catholic. I went to Catholic college. I was confirmed in college. But at the end of the day, when you have to make hard decisions and publicly tell people what they deserve to know, I am absolutely pro-choice. Bottom line. Part 2 of that, I would absolutely not effectuate any arrest for someone coming into the Commonwealth to attempt to achieve a procedure. That's the bottom line. Part 3, I apologize, Darcy, if I didn't answer your question. I'll put it up on my website. Thank you.
Sheriff Bowler.
Yes, first of all, just to clarify things, that would not be a function of the sheriff's office. I think the decision that just came down with the Roe versus Wade, it was totally disgusting. Every woman should be allowed to make the choice when it comes to abortion. It should be left up to them. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I have a question from Fernando. Community outreach. Oh, sorry, I just lost it. Community outreach is not about hiring people. It is about developing trusting relationships with vulnerable parts of the community. Are you going to offer material in Spanish? Sheriff Bowler.
This mute thing is getting to me. Okay, so anyways, yes, at intake, we provide that, we provide Spanish-speaking material already. We also have officers here that speak fluent Spanish to help coordinate or help with the inmates during intake so that they fully understand what's taking place during the whole process.
Alf?
50th question. I'm finally in sync with the mute. So look at our website, barbalunga.com. There's Spanish translation on it. It's important to us, number 1. Number 2, we're out in the community. We're actively going to Latino festivals to talk to individuals. I feel it's this important that we have a member of our committee. She is Latino from Puerto Rico, obviously fluent. She gives us over the hump sometimes when we're trying to translate why it's important for a leadership change. So that's what I alluded to before. I didn't answer Darcy's question. I was thinking about personnel, and that's my fault to Tom as well. I think he took my lead. It was more of an encompassing question. So finally, what I would say is, if we're honored enough to win this, we're going to have an open house at the House of Correction, and we're going to recruit people of color to come up and see how their money's being spent and see what the functionality is like. And we're going to do that on a scheduled basis. And that goes into our whole platform here about transparency at all levels.
All right, last question. So I'm going to ask this to both of you. It is about the current situation, but Alf, you can answer about future situation. Are those who are incarcerated and working in the various programs and shops currently existing paid? And if So what is their hourly wage, or for ALF, what would your plan be for paying individuals who are incarcerated working? Sheriff Bowler.
You talk about are the inmates working in programs getting paid?
Yes.
No, they're not. Only those individuals receive a salary or a pay or receive a paycheck on a work release program. Those would be the individuals that I talked about before that go out and work all day long at Unistress, Samco Industries, LTI Smart Glass. The individuals that are here incarcerated working in programs do not get paid, no.
Alf?
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, the problem with that is there's nobody out working in the community. So that's a fallacy on that, number one. Number two, we tackle it differently. We're not authorized to pay inside, but what we would do is we would mitigate all phone charges. You're going to be able to call your loved one without being charged, especially exorbitant types of prices. Secondly, canteen goods. Those prices, that's not going to be a profit anymore for that sheriff's office. There's a whole line item built in on canteen off the backs of the men up there, not the woman, as we've talked about at numerous times. That's not going to be like that anymore. Canteen's going to be reduced to at cost, so individuals can buy those extra items. That is basically fair. Thank you.
All right. So we're going to end the Q&A section. That was very interesting. Thank you both. I guess we'll end with, if both of you want to end with 2 minutes and 2 minutes max about why we should vote for you. And we can start with Alf.
Thanks, Helen. I know this was probably a handful for you, so I appreciate it. And thank you for everybody on the call, over 100 people when we started. So I do appreciate that. People have a lot going on at night. Here's what I'm going to say about this. An excellent leader performs when there's no scrutiny, not when there's some type of emergency and all the policies are reviewed and perhaps they're adjusted. That's reactive type of leadership, not proactive. And not when there's an audit with poor results, and we're going to be releasing audits all summer long that you can dig in independently and corroborate what we say. And those audits maybe motivate you at that time to make some changes. And certainly, most importantly, not when you have some campaign pressure. All of a sudden, when you have some campaign pressure, I'm the candidate obviously here, that's when you start rolling out the new programs and hiring new individuals and advertising the paper and really doing the usual things that most people can't stand about politicians, to be quite frank about it. Again, if I had my druthers, I don't want to run for this office. I wish the vehicle for me was a gubernatorial appointment. If I had the resume and I passed through the background check and I was promoted, or maybe an executive EOPS position, civil service, I scored 100, something of that nature. But this is the only vehicle for me, and this is my dream for a number of reasons. Again, go to barbalunga.com. But getting back to what I said, this is not how an effective leader behaves. There's a reason why basically less than 9% of the people in Berkshire County has ever heard of Tom Bowler's name or even knows what happens behind the sheriff's office curtain. It's because they've gone above and beyond to keep it that way. I mean, it's not a conspiracy, but it's something that works for them well. They had a Facebook post that basically trashed the ACUL poll, by the way. They talked about 850 person sample size was a junk poll. That is not the truth. A rock star poll is usually about 450 people in Berkshire County. The ACLU, I have no affiliation with them on the poll. They must have spent a massive amount of funds to get this correct. So I believe it to be an excellent quality poll, and we should all believe that nobody's heard of Tom for the most part and doesn't know what's going on up there. And there's a reason. If I'm your future Berkshire County sheriff, I'm going to spend your money judiciously. It's not going to be some grab it while you can money. And make sure you understand, the sheriff has full discretionary spending on that line item. He can spend it any single way he wants.
So that was beyond the 2 minutes. So we're going to go to Sheriff Bowler. Sheriff Bowler, you have 2 minutes and then you will be muted.
I love the job. You've done a great job.
Thanks, Helen. I won't even need 2 minutes. I just want to I want to thank the ACLU. I want to thank the Women's League of Voters, and I want to thank the NAACP for giving us this opportunity to be a participant in this forum. Look I've had a passion for the last 11 and a half years. That passion just doesn't end in 12 years. Okay. Each year goes on. My passion to create a stronger, healthier, and safer community continues. There's no time limit or term limit on that. As long as I have a passion to create that safe, strong, and healthy community, I will continue to do my job. We provide a whole host of programs. A lot of the information you heard tonight is false when it comes to our budget. My opponent clearly does not understand how the budget works. I do not dictate my budget. My budget comes from the state legislator, the House, the Senate, and the Administration and Finance. They dictate my budget. I will continue to represent this community as sheriff and continue my passion as I have for the last 37 years in public safety. I offer anybody on this that participated in this forum tonight, offer each and every one of you at any point in time, come to this facility, tour this facility like many, many others and groups and agencies have. See what we do up here firsthand, then make your choice and make your judgment. There is no hiding anything. We are fully transparent when it comes to this facility, and I welcome everyone to come up and visit this facility and see what we do firsthand for the inmate population and how we can get them back into the community to be a much better person and a good citizen. I want to thank you guys for the time tonight.
All right. So thank you both to the candidates. Thank you again to the ACLU and the League of Women and Voters for partnering with us on this. And I am going to turn it back to Dennis. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you, Helen, Kamar, Political Action Committee. There is absolutely, or I should say, there should not be any doubt in anyone who participated tonight in this forum how important this race is and how important it is to elect the right sheriff and what that position represents to a community. A community can grow or it can falter based on this type of leadership. So I will say again, this is an important race. Everyone needs to pay attention and everyone needs to get out and vote. Politics is local. Change happens on the local level. We do care about our national platform, but we can do little about that if we do not pay attention to our local politics. They drive our national politics. So, Helen, I really want to thank you for your ability to keep everyone on track. It was a very difficult task. I do appreciate you as chair of the Political Action Committee. I do appreciate the entire Political Action Committee. And this is what we're about. This is about community getting involved. And it's so important. So again, do not just sit back and think your vote do not matter or does not matter. It matters. Get out and vote. I want to thank Sheriff Bowler. I want to thank Alf Barbalonga for your agreeing to come and give us an idea of your principles and your policies and what you stand for, so that we, the voters, we, the people, can make the right decision. Again, thank you, everybody. I want to thank the over 100 people that tuned in. I want to encourage you also to tune in to our August meeting, when we will again bring you a forum on the DA's race. Also, we will begin that meeting with a presentation by Tanisha Sullivan, who is running for Secretary of State, who just happened to, it's my opinion, have the most dynamic, electrifying presentation at the Democratic Convention. So we are going to bring her to you on August, at our August meeting, right at the beginning of the meeting, for a very short presentation from her. And then we're going to get right into, again, another very important race in our community, the DA race. So again, thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Helen, Kamar, the Political Action Committee. Great job. And maybe that's why we're the leading branch for membership. Thank you.